Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Kris Hampton.
And this is Nate Drolet.
And Nate, in these internet days, it's really easy for something to gain popularity quickly, lose popularity quickly, even though the thing itself, in this case, training exercises for climbing, are exactly the same amount of effective as they've always been. But I don't think we value them that way. We value them often based on what everyone else is saying and what the zeitgeist says is working. Do you agree with that?
Totally. It immediately makes me think of when knees over toes guy, kind of strength and conditioning world.
Yeah.
When he really got popular, and a lot of people were like, oh, this is really cool. There were a lot of old school strength coaches who were a little grumpy because they were like, well, we've known about all these exercises forever. They've been around, and people are like, well, you aren't talking about them. They were like, but,
right.
what is in front of you matters. And that, especially with social media, man, we all have very short attention spans.
Totally. And I look at something like campusing, just like traditional campus exercises, as a really good example of this, because there was a time that you and I probably remember, some of the listeners who weren't around in the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s won't remember this, but there was a time when campusing was like, oh, this is the only way to get better. Like, this is the way you get stronger. There is no elite rock climber on earth who doesn't campus. Like, that was what the zeitgeist felt like. And now,
absolutely,
all it takes is a couple people to say, I don't know if campusing's that effective. A couple prominent voices to say, I don't know if it's that effective. And it loses popularity.
Yeah, very quickly. Hilariously, quick side note, because it's funny to me. I know I'm in Salt Lake, Utah, because the campus rungs on the campus board at my gym have marks from dry tooling in them. Like little grooves, a lot of them. Someone did a lot of dry tooling.
Are you serious?
Yeah, with actual axes. Like, because they're
Wow.
all chewed up. It's wild. Something I have never experienced. Also, I've never lived anywhere where it snowed. So, yeah, I don't know if that's normal, but
wow.
Hilarious.
I would throw a fit if somebody came into my gym with an ice axe, dry tooling up the campus board.
Yeah, wild. But apparently that's all
wild.
campus board's good for these days, if you were to believe social media.
Yeah, totally. And just theories. Like, I think we live in a time where it's a good idea for the algorithm to just throw out your theories and your ideas without really having any evidence whatsoever.
Totally.
The more sure you sound of yourself, the more factual it becomes. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time. We say, this is fact, this is true, this is the most effective. And if you sound confident, people believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I to a degree, I get it because gray area is tough on social media. It does not get clicks. Trust me, that is the route I try and go. And I don't
totally.
get any
I live in the middle.
Yeah. It, I don't know. I understand the desire to make strong statements because it is rewarded in an algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're going to do here, we're going to break this into a couple of episodes. We're going to talk about the most underrated and the most overrated training exercises for climbing specifically, in our opinions, as we're seeing it currently. Let's start with the most underrated. And let's put this disclaimer here. Underrated doesn't mean that it's the greatest thing ever and everybody's missing the boat. It just means we're not valuing it to the degree it should be valued.
Yeah.
So we're not saying this is the greatest exercise ever. You guys aren't doing it. You should start doing it right now.
Yeah.
But we are saying there's some value in this, and people are undervaluing it pretty dramatically. Let's take a closer look at it.
Yeah. And it's worth keeping in mind that with overrated, underrated lists, this is a time capsule. So worth noting, we're recording this March 2026.
Yep.
This is all a time capsule. Things that are underrated now, like if we look at, when I started climbing in 2005, any form of training was underrated in the United States because
absolutely
the strat was just climb. Hey, just climb more. Works for Kris Sharma, Dave Graham. Still crazy to me that all of us weren't like, oh, just climb, as if we hadn't been trying that. And we weren't all turning into Kris Sharma and Dave Graham. Like, how long did we all have to take to realize? Apparently, like a very long time. But this is all in the context of the moment. So, 2005, any form of training, literally touch a weight, would have been, it doesn't even matter, just bro lifting, would have been better than just climbing. Underrated. Yeah. Where now, that's not the case. Most people who listen to Training for Climbing podcasts are at least familiar with strength and conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's a great point to keep in there. If you're listening to this in 2028, it might be the case that these things we're talking about are now dramatically overrated,
Totally.
Or we're valuing them correctly. Who knows?
My first underrated one is hard moves done well.
Yeah, timeless way to get better at climbing, and we often forget about it.
Yeah, there's a few things that I see in climbing. One is we love novelty. People want to do new things all the time. We don't even, compared to other sports, it's kind of wild to think about. We don't do the same warm-ups every day. We want to go do new boulders every day or new routes every day we go out for the most part. We don't repeat things almost ever. We have this checkbox mentality of, oh, well, I did the thing. It didn't matter if you did it by hook or by crook to get to the top. Cool. Green check mark. What's next? In any other sport where you are having to rehearse things like we do in climbing, because a lot of climbing, the hardest sends are rehearsals and performances. They're, on-sighting, maybe its own game, but for projecting and red pointing, we're rehearsing. And then we are trying to perform after rehearsing. And so much climbing that I see done and that it's easy to fall into is, oh, well, I'm going to do these things that I can do fast. And so you very rarely take the time to perfect moves, to climb them really well. There's this idea that I think about all the time. And essentially it's, what does great actually mean? For me, there was a time when I had this just concept that I would think about of what actually is V8. Because, if I try and project V8 at that time, maybe it would take me a handful of tries or whatever. And when I would do it, if I just tried really, really hard, I could kind of get it done pretty fast. Well, if I then repeated it a few times, it would get much easier. And then if I repeated it over multiple days with rest in between, it would get easier and easier. And after a couple weeks of this, man, you come back, it'd be the end of my warm-up and it would feel smooth and flowing. And I wouldn't even have to put that much effort into 90% of it. So then there became this question of, what is V8? Is V8 the one at the end where I actually climb it very well? I won't say perfect because that's not a thing. But this time where I climb it really well, or is it how it felt the first time? Now, someone looking for the physical stimulus of training might say, oh, well, at the end, that's a terrible physical stimulus because it's so much easier. Clearly, you're not going to be getting that strong from something so easy. But I care about performance. If I could make every V8 feel like that end one to where it's, oh, this is in my end of the warm-up grade, how hard could I really climb?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that brings up an interesting point that I was just wrestling with in a connecting dots freestyle on the Patreon podcast. Um, Thinking about tactics, what are tactics? What should they be in service of? Climbing something better or climbing something faster? And
Ooh,
I think we have to separate performance and practice, or performance and training. And since we are talking about training exercises, I think you're spot on with this, that in training, in practice, doing something better is really important. If nothing else, for the sake of understanding that a really difficult thing that you can barely scrap your way through the first time can get better and better and better and soon be pretty easy to you. If
yeah.
nothing else, just for the understanding of that, so that when you do approach a project, you know how much you need to do to get it done. Sometimes you're going to have to do a move nearly perfectly to get through it. Sometimes you can scrape your way through, and that's fine. Um, Separating performance from practice there, I think, is the key. And it's a hard distinction to make, like we've talked about a bunch of times on this podcast, is they both look the same. It's more about your intention. What is your intention? What do you hope to learn? What do you hope to gain? Are you trying to just send, or are you trying to actually improve? And since we're talking about improvement here, I think that might be the absolute best way to improve at climbing. And you're right, we just don't value it enough.
Yeah. There's a few things that I think can really help with this. One is being comfortable with repeating things. It's funny. A few things that came to mind immediately was, we've talked about this before. You had an old blog post about you had your limit boulders for your season that when you were back still in Cincinnati, and one was the Black Lung
Yeah.
simulator. And I remember at the time being like, that's wild, because you're like, oh, I set these and they'll be up for 3 months and they will be my Wednesday workout for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And I was at the time, I think I was probably in my, I don't know, maybe mid 20s, I forget, but I could not comprehend the idea of, oh, we have these 3 plastic boulders. This is my Wednesday workout for the next 12 weeks.
Yeah. And those are an interesting blend of this performance and practicing trying to do something really well, because there was no way I was getting up that boulder if I did it poorly. So it essentially was a constraint put in place to force me to climb really well and really precise and with great tension every single attempt. I could not fake my way through it, couldn't scrape my way through it. I had to do it really well.
So I love the way you said that, because to me, this is an important distinction. You said I had to do it well. It was a constraint that made me do it. But there is still a choice there. You looked at it and you said, I can do this if I do these hard moves well. Where you can also say, well, I just need to be stronger. Maybe if I hold these positions, I'll gain muscle memory. I'll gain specific strength. I last year was coaching this younger climber who was a phenomenal V14 climber. And I had asked him at one point, because he had, grown up on a youth team. I was like, oh, have you ever done like perfect repeats? He was like, oh, what's that? I was like, well, it's where you do the same thing multiple times, trying to do it a little bit better, each time. He was like, oh, no, but anytime if I've done like 4x4s or any endurance work where I'm repeating things, that just naturally happens. And, I had to pause. I was like, I love to hear that it naturally happens for you. And that's good to keep in mind. But yeah, that is not what naturally happens for a lot of people. A lot of people are like, okay, just head down, Rocky Balboa slugfest on this 4x4 or endurance workout, whatever. But for him, it had been drilled into him, and he had just instilled this idea of, if I'm going to do a climb more than once, I'm going to make it better every single go. He was constantly analyzing how he could improve every little thing. Like the idea of doing hard moves well was like breathing air to him. And there's a reason why, he was only 19 and a V14 climber.
Yeah. I think a good way to think about the distinction between performance and practice is performance is the pursuit of doing it good enough, and practice is the pursuit of doing it even better. I think that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So for anyone listening who is like, this sounds great, I'd like to do it. Couple ideas I have, and if you have any more, please share. I do think things like perfect repeats are great, where you do the same moderately challenging climb, flash level, maybe a grade below, multiple times in a row, and just try and every time you come down, say, what can I do better? And there's always something. I mean, I've literally had problems where for the entire time it's up, like that it's set in a gym for 3 months. Every time at the end of my warm up, I'll go and do it at least once or twice and always ask, how can I do this better? And you know what? Even after 3 months, I will still have something.
I think there's also there's also value in saying, how can I do it better? And you try a thing and maybe it's not better. You know, maybe you
Yes,
change your rhythm on it because you think, oh, that could work better, and it doesn't. There's value in realizing, okay, that didn't work on this style of move.
Yeah. Another one is just, frankly, be aware of it. I do think projecting is really useful. And I would say projecting routes can be great because you want to do every move well if you're going to perform well. But if you're not aware of it, man, I see people who are 20 goes in deep into a project and they're still sloppy on the entire, whatever, 5'11, 5'12 intro.
And they
It's
don't
like,
know
hey,
they are. That's
no.
That's the issue. Like, I'm glad you broke up analyze and awareness, because I think they're different things fundamentally. You can analyze and you can do it via video. You can talk to somebody who is standing there. You can make guesses once you're standing on the ground, you know? But if you're aware and you've built that awareness over time, I think this is one of the most important skills a climber can have. It speeds up the performance. It speeds up the training. It speeds up the practice. It speeds up everything if you're more aware of what's happening while it's happening. Doesn't mean you're putting lots of like cognitive load toward it. It just means when a thing happens, you're aware and you're feeling it and you're taking stock of it. And then once you're on the ground, you're remembering, oh, I felt this, this happened. That's a different skill, I think, than analysis. And I think it's the more important of the two because it should always be the first step.
Agreed. I think analysis is great. It's a very cerebral thing. But like you said, without awareness, it doesn't matter how well you can analyze. And I see this all the time. I do a bunch of in-person coaching and I'll talk, dog, this happens every day. I talk to someone and, they'll fail on a move. They'll come down and I'll be like, okay, what happened? They'll be like, well, I was drop kneeing and I don't think it put enough pressure through whatever, the outside of my toe. And I could have pressed through this other foot more and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then I'll let them fully talk and I'll say, you weren't drop kneeing. You were completely square. Your other foot wasn't even on the wall. But in their mind, because before they left the ground, they were like, I'm going to drop knee. But for whatever reason, they didn't. And because they don't have that built-in awareness yet, whatever happens on the wall, that's, between the holds and God. Like they're only in body.
Yeah.
Having awareness is so huge. And I would also even argue there are great climbers who have great awareness. And maybe when it comes to the assessment, they don't have all the words you might want to be able to explain, but they have the feeling. Like they know what they need to do to make a change.
Yeah.
And the way they explain it may be, air quote, wrong or whatever, but it's the tools they need. And because their awareness is so tapped in, they can make the change they need when on the wall.
Yep, absolutely. My first one here is going to be foot on campusing. And I know not every campus board has foot rungs. If a campus board at your gym does not have foot rungs, you should talk to your gym about it, because I think this is a dramatically underrated, undervalued modality. And I think you can do a lot with it,
Yeah.
all the way from aerobic endurance to explosive power. I don't know that any one of them is more underrated than the other, because I just think this as a modality in itself is dramatically underrated. There's so much to it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think this is one of those things that's completely slept on. Steve McClure's talked about it, about how, because he's a incredible on-siter, also climbed 15B in his 50s. And that's his setup that he has at home, is a little campus board with foot rungs. And he talked about how he would do so many endurance workouts on that. And
Yeah.
I had a summer before arguably my best sport climbing season to date, where essentially the only training I did was because the gym I was trying to climb at, it was in Lander. And Elemental had very funny hours of when the gym was open or closed. And I got annoyed by trying to line up. So I was like, okay. And they had a campus board with foot rungs in the corner of their weightlifting gym. And I was like, I'm just going to base my training around that. Like, I know how to rock climb. So I'm just going to do this. And that was what my entire training was centered around. Went out and had a phenomenal sport climbing season.
Yeah, I think it's this middle ground between on the wall training becomes a little too technical and too much variety to be able to measure well.
Mhm.
And things that are more measurable, like finger strength training or explosive pull-ups for power training, or repeaters on the hangboard, or whatever, the opposite end of that spectrum, where you take all the technical out of it, but they're extremely measurable. They lack that the component that feels more like climbing and will be part of the mental process, will be part of the movement. And I think the campus board is a great middle ground with that. It's a little easier to measure than just a random spray wall or random circuit, because you can measure hand movements, you can measure by time, and it's not, oh, I just encountered a hold that was really bad, so that reduced my time, or I ended up on bigger holds than I thought, and that extended my time. It didn't really make my endurance wasn't necessarily better. I was just on bigger holds.
Or you get more efficient with a long circuit. If you've got a 50 move circuit, after 6 weeks of training on it, let's say, you went from going 20 moves up to 40 moves. Well, did you just learn it?
Right. You found all the efficiencies. You're finding all the little drop knees where you were square the first couple of days or whatever.
Yeah, you're moving faster, whatever it is. Where with this, I agree. It's this nice middle ground of, it is still movement. It is still climbing movement but it isn't so technical that the technical aspect isn't going to make or break the workout. Like, you're not going to get such good technique at this that, oh no, it's not that efficient anymore, I need to change it. And you're not, once you get tired, being a little sloppy, if we're talking about endurance work, not power work, getting a little sloppy isn't going to really change things, because it's such a simple exercise. It's not like you're going to, oh no, not spot where your feet are.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's so easy to, for a lot of campus boards anyway, for a well-built campus board, or well-designed campus board, you can change the intensity really easily. Whereas if you have a circuit, it might be tough to change the intensity of it in a small way. You might make too big of a change. The change might not be big enough because you're limited by how you can change it. But with the campus board, I can go from the large rungs to the medium rungs to the small rungs. My campus board has different size foot rungs all the way across it. So I could use the better foot rungs or the worse foot rungs if I want more, weight on my arms and less on my feet. And you can very easily go from, this is really explosive and it's a 2-move explosive limit boulder, essentially, to this is a 60-move, aerobic endurance workout. or at least that's the direction it's trending. And then it includes the if it's on the endurance side, it's I'm having to fight with myself to hang on, which is an important part of the whole thing. I'm finding that my movement changes as I get more pumped. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? And you're having to make some decisions. If it's more on the power side, it's like you're still working the timing, the chain of events that happens to be more explosive. You're getting the technique of being powerful down. Whereas with something like an explosive pull-up, there's nothing happening with your lower body at all. But we know that's an important part of being an explosive climber. So for me, it just checks so many more boxes than the super measurable things. And it's more measurable, easier to adapt to your situation than just having a random wall available.
And the other thing that's nice is because campus boards aren't that popular now, they tend to be empty.
Yeah, totally. That's really important actually, because people complain all the time that they can't get their circuit done because there are too many people on the wall, or they're taking up too much of the wall, or they didn't set anything that works well for a single powerful move. The holds are either too far away or too close together or too good or too bad. It's easy to get that stuff on the campus board.
Yeah. Yeah. Or do you have any just personal favorite exercises? And I know this isn't, broad prescriptions, but just any things that you have liked more than others?
Yeah, and I probably should make a video about this as well. That would definitely be the better way to do this. But I will explain a couple that I really like and that I've used regularly for quite a while now. Number one is just a 2-move explosive sequence. You do it leading with your left hand and then leading with your right hand. And it would be something like start on rung 1, go to rung 3 with one hand. Having your feet already set up in a position so you can explode out of there. And then once you hit rung 3, and so your hands are a little separated, you're not just matched on a rung, then you explode out of that position and try to catch a high rung. And you can go from big holds to make it more powerful to smaller holds to make it more about contact strength. You can keep your foot on, which means you're going to have a really high foot that you're exploding out of, or you can jump out of that position. So I think you have some interesting options there that, depending on what you're good or bad at or what situation you're trying to train for, you can tailor to. And I find that one's really important for people who don't quite understand the timing of the explosive move and the latching a hold, or can't quite commit to latching a hold when their foot comes off. This is just an easier way, a more graded way, more measurable way to learn that, as opposed to finding a random boulder that you can do on the gym's wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
And the other one that I've used quite a bit, and I use this a lot during my, let's try to finish up my 105.13s, is more of a power endurance type version of this, where I'm doing a powerful sequence that'll be like start on rung 1, go to 2 with my left hand, and then explode all the way to 5 with my right hand. And then ladder down back to 1 and do it on the other side. And then ladder down back to 1 and do a different powerful sequence. Maybe it's from 1 to 5, and then I have to pull through to 6 or 7. And then ladder back down, keeping my feet on all the time and getting in some positions that are like really high foot that I have to explode out of, things like that. And this way I can tailor the power endurance to how I want it to be for whatever my project is. I can either stay on the campus board for 30 seconds and then rest for 60 or 90 seconds, or I can make it a little longer, more extensive power endurance where I'm on the wall for 60 seconds and I'm resting for 2 or 3 minutes in between rounds of this. And it's so easy to adjust the difficulty of the thing that I just can't replicate it on a wall, even a wall that I know really well.
Yeah.
I can't replicate this sort of workout on that wall. And I can go until the movements are simple, so I'm not going to fall off because of a technical error. And there are times when you want the technical aspect of it and to grind through that. But in this case, I'm looking for the power endurance stimulus in my forearms specifically. And this is a much better way for me to get it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Being able to tailor it to your project, I think, can be super useful and just tailor it to your needs. I mean, I've always loved the campus punks, which is essentially, you can do it normal or reversed, but normal would be, okay, we're going to pre-fatigue essentially on a campus board and then immediately walk over and try and do a boulder a little bit tired. So it'd be the campus punks. And then I loved the reverse campus punks when I wanted to do Zookeeper in the Red River Gorge, which is a hard boulder to just hang on until the top. I mean, that's exactly what I did. But I didn't have access to a boulder, so I had a flashboard. I put a strap, like a toe strap through it, just put my feet in, pulled as hard as I could for 15 straight seconds. And then I went and did 60 seconds of hard foot on campus boarding because that mimicked what I needed.
Yeah, I think the campus punks are really, really valuable. And again, it's another thing you can tailor really well. You could pre-fatigue with more aerobic endurance. You're on the campus board on big jugs for 3 minutes, and then you have to do a really technical vertical boulder. Or you do a 30-second really powerful thing on the campus board, and then you do a steep, powerful boulder that involves compression or whatever. You can tailor this however you want. And I think the addition of the campus board is just such a valuable piece of this that's dramatically underrated.
Yeah. The campus board or the foot rungs?
The foot rungs on the campus board.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even think of it. It's funny because campusing is traditionally no feet,
Yeah.
based on the campus center that Wolfgang developed this at. But I don't even think of a campus board anymore without foot rungs. Like, to me, it's a necessary part.
Agreed.
All right. Before we move on to the next most underrated climbing training, let's take a quick break. Training for climbing is complicated. Finger strength programs, movement programs, lifting programs, power endurance programs. Where and when do you start, and what should you include? At Power Company Climbing, we keep it simple. One proven plan based on your level of experience and goals that includes everything you need. Finger training, lifting, movement skills, and most important, lots of intentional climbing. Delivered via mobile app with a customizable calendar to fit your schedule, Proven Plans are a complete system that can take you from V2 to V12 or 510 to 514. Power Company Climbing. Learn, grow, excel.
All right. Cool. So my second one, once again, this is a little broader. Not necessarily exactly a direct training method, but my number 2, underrated, is questioning your understanding of the basics.
Okay.
So this one is, I think, super important because climbing doesn't have this didactic system, this method of this is how we teach everyone to do everything perfectly. It's not violin or something, or chess, where you can say, hey, here's a solid method. Here's how you can understand the fundamentals. You kind of show up. It's a lot of self-taught. Whoever at the gym around you is telling you things. Also, a lot of times it's just blind leading the blind. It's your friend who climbed V2 before you did, who's telling you how to use good technique.
Totally.
There are so many things that we learn and just instill without even realizing they're horribly wrong. And then you keep climbing for a long time, having never really gone back and analyzed. One example that kind of cracked me up, there's a YouTuber named Mike Boyd, and he put out a video called The Worst Climbing Advice in Existence. And I was like, hell yeah, brother, I'm going to click on this. Clickbait complete. Clicked on it, and he was like, yeah, trust your feet. this phrase, so worst advice anyone could ever give. And he lays out why. He's like, it failed me. It was bad advice. I tried trusting my feet until the cows came home. It was bad. And then I learned, Kris, he had never been told to place his feet precisely. So if there was a good part of a foothold, he just wasn't stepping on it. And then he would have all the faith in the universe. On the horrible part, like he didn't have the fundamental of, well, yeah, trusting your feet's good, but dog, you got to have something to trust in. Like, put your foot in the foothold and then we trust it.
Yeah. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who are like, yeah, but I already know to put my foot in the precise spot, you know. But I think the idea of questioning your understanding of the basics starts from either starts from where you are and goes down, or starts at the very beginning and goes up. And there's going to be somewhere where there's a hole that you haven't thought about, that you haven't considered, whatever that hole is. Like, I just made a video about the place I think a lot of advanced climbers get stuck is in making the decision between, am I going to lock this off and do it statically, or am I going to go with momentum? And they sort of get stuck in the middle where they're like pulling up as if they're going to lock it off, but then they try to go with momentum out of a disadvantageous position, so they don't do the move. And I think lots of advanced climbers get stuck there because they haven't made the decision. Okay, I'm going to lock this off and actually try it that way. They let their natural internal idea override what they started out with. And decision making should be a really basic thing. I'm going to try the move this way. I commit to that. I try it that way. But we don't do that a lot of the time. And I see it over and over and over. So I think that's a good example of somewhere along this chain of events, there's a hole in the basics of what you're doing. And you're not realizing it because you're not rethinking these things. You're not assessing what's happening. You know, you're just going with your gut, and you don't know any better.
Yeah. It, like, question everything, and especially simple things. I mean, this happens all the time. Someone will try a move and I'll be like, oh, like, you know, what are you thinking about when you're doing this? Let's say they're on a 45 and they pin their hips to the wall before they even start to move. They're like, oh, well, having your hips into the wall is good. Like, well, why is it good? And they're like, because it's good. You know,
I was told it's good.
Well, yeah, they're like, well, it keeps you underneath the holds. I'm like, okay, well, if your hips are pressed against the wall when you start a move, where are they going the second you let go of your hand to reach? They're like, out. Like, okay, so then they're not into the wall then. Is that good? Like, no. Like, there are so many things that we just accept and we repeat. Something that for me has been super helpful is being a coach. Because people will ask me things, like very simple questions, which are the most dangerous kind. They'll be like, well, why does twisting work? And I have to just say, you know, I'll be honest, I don't entirely know why twisting works. I have hunches. Like, there are certain things that I think about in certain situations where they're good, but I won't pretend to know exactly why twisting works well. Like, and anytime I hear someone else try and say why twisting works, they'll be like, oh, it takes weight off your hands. No, it doesn't. Twisting puts more weight through your hands than being square does. Like, without question, for most situations. But it does other things. Like, you can press through 2 footholds often a lot better while twisting than if you're square. Being square is really nice for 1 foothold. Twisting can also take a lot of force out of your upper body pulling muscles, so that's really nice. There are a lot of things it does, but I won't pretend to know all of them. And honestly, listening to people ask simple questions, even if I'm in the gym and I hear someone ask someone something else, they'll be like, hey, like, when should I heel hook? Great question. Man, I could think, like, I heard that a few months ago and I thought about it for weeks. I was like, yeah, when do you heel hook? Like, why heel instead of toe, or toe hook? Like, it's so easy to have a rapid fire instinctual response to so many of these thoughts of, well, you don't chicken wing because of this, or you climb with straight arms. Brothers, straight arms I could talk about for days. You climb with straight arms because of this, or you do crimp or you don't crimp because of that. Stop. You're a smarter person than you were when you learned these things. You have so much more information now in your climbing than when you learned most of this stuff. Because when you were a beginner, you were drinking from the fire hose and you just kind of accepted what you were told. You need to go back. You need to think about this and say, okay, I know more. Is that still true? How would I explain this to someone who's brand new?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm all about rethinking assumptions and trying to find better ways to explain things, and it almost is never a rule. Like I don't think there are any rules in how we climb. It's going to be different in every scenario. So you're right. Anytime I hear someone say, "This is why you heel hook. This is why you twist," I can poke a hole in that almost instantly. So I think we have to constantly, for every boulder or route or move that we're on, I think the best climbers are very quickly sort of rethinking things. They just do it all the time, so they're way better at it than you. They don't have a rule, and they're saying, maybe not cognitively going, should I crimp this? No. Should I open hand this? No. Should I twist here? No. But they're rifling through all those things metaphorically and understanding this works, this works, this works. Oh, let me try this because I'm not sure. Let me try this because I'm not sure. But they very quickly come to those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, these lessons happen all the way up. An example I like that to me was fascinating to watch. There was a video, maybe Desert Gold, I forget, or Gold Standard, Keenan Takahashi V15 in Bishop. And there's a long video of him putting it up. And he keeps getting through the opening crux. And then I think it's like a V9 stand, something like that. Well, he keeps falling on this big cross move in the V9 stand. And the first time he fell, I was like, oh no, he's a boulderer. Like, because the thing was, he was getting pumped when he was there. And it's this big cross move. Well, he was chicken winging because he was pumped. And you've climbed in the red. You know that when you're chicken winging, crossing over a chicken wing is almost impossible.
Yeah.
But if you're very strong and you're not fatigued and you can keep an elbow down, a lot of times, this isn't a perfect rule because rules aren't really things. Crossing over ends up being a much better way in a lot of situations. Because if you cross under, essentially you handcuff, you get your arms trapped against each other. Yeah. And unless it's a jug that you can just swing out on, crossing under your other hand, it gets you to the hold, but it's almost always a dead end. Unless it's a really big hold. But if you're chicken winging and your elbow's pointing up to the sky, you don't have the clearance to cross over your other hand. But he kept getting there and he kept trying to cross over, which is a very much a boulderer's thing. And the first time he fell there, I was like, oh no, you just cross under. Because it was a jug he was going to. But this was clearly not in his toolbox. And he goes up and he falls there a couple times before he finally does a link and he does under and he was like, oh my God, it's under. And I had been, yelling my screen for 10 minutes at this point. But this is a perfect example of, if you're a boulderer, your move set doesn't cross under quite as much. And you don't know how to move around a big pumped chicken wing compared to a sport climber. So this is going back to what I would consider basics for a V15, V16 climber.
Yeah, totally. I agree. My next one is, and I'm not even sure exactly how to say this. The way I usually say it is scapular control. I'm not talking about this old advice of lock your shoulders and put your scapula in your back pocket sort of thing.
Military posture.
Yeah, I'm talking more about how much control can we get out of our shoulders when we're hanging, and I think that's a thing that's gotten lost in this time of like isolating finger strength training. And from what I can tell, it's the beginning of almost every move we do in climbing is somehow pulling from the shoulder, or at least through the shoulder.
It's your foundation.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of people saying things like, well, hangboarding is harder on my shoulders than on my fingers, so I'm going to train my fingers another way. Then when are you training your shoulders? Like, your shoulders are the weak link there. When are we training them? And I've seen, at least for myself, a lot of benefits from making sure that I can actively engage and control what's happening in my shoulders. I don't think there's a perfect way to train this. And I don't think the like powerlifting methods of training shoulders necessarily do this. They might aid it. But there's a skill to this as well as a strength to this that I think we're missing a lot of. And when we look at climbers like an Alex Magos, who can one arm hang an edge indefinitely, it seems,
Yeah.
He's also really good when he gets in really wide positions. He has a lot of control in those positions. It's not just because his fingers are strong. It's because he can control what's happening with his scapula or through his shoulder. One of the ways I see this demonstrated, beyond the like going from a full passive hang into a one-arm pull-up, which I think a lot of people can't do. A lot of people do a one-arm pull-up from an engaged shoulder and then don't find much carryover to their climbing. But if you can do it from a passive hang or from your shoulder not being super engaged, then I think you'll start to see more carryover. But the way I see this demonstrated that I think is interesting for people is, can you like hang on a bar and control which way you rotate without bending your arm? Can you just hang there and stay, okay, I'm not going to rotate. Okay, now I'm going to rotate right. Now I'm going to rotate left. And you make that happen. Then can you do it on an edge, even a big edge? And then can you do it on smaller edges? You can even do it on something that's hanging like a ring. And the ring doesn't turn, but you do. And I think that's more about how well you can control what's happening in your scapula. And I think that's going to make a huge difference on those big moves where you're spread out and you've just got your fingertips on a hold that's really far away from you. You're stretched out and now you have to engage it. I see this a lot on the campus board where people will be able to latch a hold but not be able to match.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they aren't controlling through their scapula at all. And when you're able to, it just makes hard moves easier. You feel like your fingers are stronger even when they're not necessarily.
100%. Yeah, I love this. I mean, this is something you were experimenting with first, and you at one point were like, hey, there's something here. And so I took it seriously. And for the last couple of years, I've really dove into this. The way I explain it to a lot of people, and this is not a perfect example, but I describe it as straight arm strength versus bent arm strength.
Right.
Because a lot of people, when they try and pull, they grab a hold and they go to pull. The first thing that moves is their elbow. Like they immediately go to bend that elbow to be able to start a move versus being able to be really anchored into that back. And whenever Kris says scapula, some nerds out there might be like, that's a bone. You can't, act whatever. There's like something crazy, like 27 muscles that connect to your scapula. Like there's a lot that maneuver around your shoulder joint, your scapula, how your scapula moves around your rib cage. There's a tremendous amount of stuff there. And I think this really coincides with your point about how it's not just strength. There's a lot of coordination here to make everything connect because it's a lot of moving pieces. An exercise I like a lot is, a lot of people will do scap shrugs. So they grab a bar and they'll just, shrug up and down. That's nice. And they can even do it with one arm. But the problem is they don't get almost any time under tension at the top position. So when you're shrugged all the way up, So what I have people do, and most people are shocked at how hard this is grab a bar with one arm, shrug up until both shoulders are parallel to the ground. And I'll also tell people, try and get your off arm, the one that's not holding onto the bar, try and get that wrist even with the bar. And you're going to hold that upper position for 8 to 12 seconds. A lot of people realize, man, I've worked with V12 climbers who cannot do this with their full body weight. They have to keep their toes on the ground.
Yep.
I love this exercise. I think you're right. It makes your hands feel much stronger to develop that strength and coordination around the shoulder to be anchored down there rather than pulling from your arms.
Yeah. And like the very basics of this, I think, is what you're talking about. And I like that you're talking about holding it in that upper position. That's something that was built into our Fingers Plus proven plan. And something I do a lot of. In fact, I just did a bunch last night after I got home from climbing. I did a bunch of that, weighted, holding them at the top position.
Yeah.
And at the other end of this, I almost sent you this video yesterday, actually, is an exercise that my friend Josh Muller showed me that I find really interesting. And I showed this to Jonathan Segrist, and he had a similar take on this, where you get on a campus board. You could do this on a wall as well, but it's easier to measure on a campus board. And you do, put your feet on, do a big move so that you're stretched out and that, that top hand is far away from you. And you can do this on a big rung to a small rung. And then you just purposely let everything cut loose. And you try to engage that shoulder and pull into it and control that swing, all off of that one stretched out arm. And this is a situation that's going to happen to you when you're climbing. And it's a great way to like dynamically engage that shoulder. We do a lot of catching, but not a lot of controlling after the catch. We don't consider that all that often. And I think this is a really valuable exercise. And to take it, there's also this disconnect between shoulders and fingers that we have in our training that I think can happen here, that can be linked together here, where as you've learned to do this on a jug, then move it down to a smaller rung, to a smaller rung, or to a smaller edge, to a smaller edge. And it's going to require both finger strength and more control through your shoulder to hold these things, whether it's just a one arm hang or a cutaway is what I'm calling these things on the campus board. And for me, that's made a bigger difference in my climbing, late in my climbing, than anything else I've tried.
Yeah, I totally believe it. I think there's so much here. And especially, I've worked with a lot of people who have really good, once again, I'll just call it bent arm strength, tremendous pulling power. And they would tell you, they're like, no, I've got strong shoulders. That's my asset even. And then when I get them to do this, they're like, well, I don't know what this is. Clearly can't be a shoulder because I got shoulders and this, I don't have this. And then the ones who really take it seriously, who do the training and then work to apply it to the wall, all will say the same thing. They're like, oh, I can stay under holds now better. I have more control over holds. Like I feel stronger on crimps, even though my hands are no stronger. Like,
yeah,
it truly is just an anchor. And something I will also add, if you're going to do these, I personally prefer to do them if you're not doing the version Kris talked about, like a cutaway on an edge. I prefer a bar.
That's upper level. I just want to make sure I'm saying that. Like if you're a beginner, don't just go fling yourself off of a campus board and try to hold it. This is like higher level. You should be able to do a one arm hang on a 20-ish mil edge before you do this at all.
Yeah, it's a very hard version. But if you want to do these, I prefer a bar over a hangboard, specifically because most hangboards, and I think the Beastmaker 1000 is a perfect example, there's a jug, but then there's this whole panel below that your hand gets to rest against, like a vertical wall. And what that means is it takes a lot of the stability out. Like you don't actually have to have that much extra stability through your wrist, elbows, and shoulders if your hand is basically touching a vertical wall. And this is, I think, kind of, it's like my beef with basically every hangboard that exists that has jugs is your wrists. Basically, you're just touching wood or plastic all the way down to your wrist. Like you're not actually fully needing that much control. So I prefer a bar for this. And I think it makes a huge difference. It's a much bigger stability ask on a bar than a hangboard.
Yeah, I agree when you're on those big holds. And then as it progresses, I like to take it to smaller than
Edges.
A bar. So
Yep,
big giant
totally.
edge, smaller edge, smaller edge, smaller edge. And what you're talking about, I think, shows up when you see people doing one-arm hangs and they keep tapping a wall next to them.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's helping you, but if I one-arm hang with one finger touching a wall next to me, I can one-arm hang for twice the time, maybe longer.
Yeah.
It's dramatically easier when you take all of that control that your shoulder has to do out of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that might seem like hyperbole to some people, but I mean, I had a friend who climbed many V14s, climbed V13s in a session, and maybe flashed up to V13, could not one arm hang a 20 mil edge free. But if he put his, just put his pointer finger next to the board, he could sit and do 5 one arm pull-ups on each arm like that. Like he could just live there. It was an enormous difference.
Yeah. And for me, this really shows up in areas like, well, I'll just say on harder climbs is where this really starts to show up, because I think one of the characteristics of harder climbs is that your moving hand is traveling further.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it's necessarily a reachy move. It just might mean you've made one big 3-foot move and now you have to make another 3-foot move, so that hand has to travel 6 feet. And you don't get the opportunity to pair up in the middle or use an intermediate somewhere. Those kinds of moves require more control through your shoulder for a longer period of time. So for me, that's where this shows up the most in climbing, is when you're either spread out really wide or your hand has to travel a longer distance.
Totally. And I will say this is useful for everyone. I see very tall climbers, like the friend I was talking about was very tall. And he was able to essentially always reach stuff with a bent elbow.
Right.
Like, he didn't have to have this one-arm shoulder control because he had an enormous wingspan and he was very good, like really great through his legs, super strong through his legs. Like he could kind of cheat around it. And most of the people I work with who I see are the worst at it are the tallest climbers, regardless of how strong they are, because they never have to be fully extended or their amount of time is very little, versus a lot of shorter climbers tend to be okay at this. But I would also say they're the ones that if you're not okay at this and you're short, you need to be, because this is something you're encountering whether you know it or not.
Yeah, it'll be a game changer.
Yeah. And I will also say for anyone who recognizes that they have to always do big moves and catch a hold with a bent elbow or a pre-engaged shoulder because they feel susceptible to injury otherwise, oh, this is huge, man. Suddenly, we have a new foundation. You have a shock absorber as your shoulder to where now you can hit things hard, but you can control it from the shoulder itself. So you're not going to feel like, oh, my shoulder's getting pulled away or my elbow's going to crash and bottom out. Yeah, I think this one's a huge one. I love it.
Yep. All right. And just to reiterate here, I think we have to say again, underrated doesn't mean you should go do this right away. It just means these are valuable things that maybe you should take another look at, especially if something we've said sounds like, oh, that describes me pretty well. Maybe take another look at these things that we're talking about, because they are valuable. We are just not valuing them currently as a community as much as maybe we should.
Yeah. And I'll also say that these are generally tailored to our audience, because all rock climbers are not equal by any means. What is underrated for just someone who climbs 2 days a month is very different than people who are, obsessed and trying to climb as much as they can all the time and optimizing. So we're saying some of these things you might hear and you'd be like, well, this doesn't seem that underrated for the majority of people. That's true. But hopefully for our audience, that's what we're aiming for, and hopefully it hit the mark.
Yep, for sure. You can find both Nate and I on the YouTubes. There'll be links for that in your show notes. You can also book a consultation with Nate over the internet, or if you're in the Salt Lake City area, you can work with him in person. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. And if you're interested in getting thoughts in your email inbox roughly monthly that are rethinking how we look at climbing and how we engage with different aspects of climbing, you should subscribe to The Current, where we can all learn, grow, and excel.
You don't know.
This time, 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 this time,